Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. It's great to have you here. If you're joining us on YouTube and want to find out more about what we do, just head on over to officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion on media production. Our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're talking about physical storage, right? We have all this stuff. We have cables and mixers and cameras and microphones. And where do we put it all? How do we keep track of it all? How do we find it? How do we secure it? I'm really looking forward to that. So get your questions into Makana so that we can get those in the second hour. If you're not in Makana, you can go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global, the easiest way to get those questions out of your head in front of our panel. And what a panel we have to answer those questions. Bill, let's hop into the first one.
Absolutely, CJ. The first question comes from Douglas Carmichael. I've tested Media MTX, an open source media proxy, and was successfully able to transcode an RTMP stream from Mimo Live to SRT and WebRTC. What use cases could a proxy like this have in production? And he's got a GitHub link there.
Alex?
Probably very few without probably 50 to 100 activations that you test. So if you've tested it once, that's great. But if I'm going to pull something off of GitHub, and it was open source, I would stressfully work on it before I put it into production. And the real reason for that is that I don't want to defend it if something goes wrong. And so you're now on the front edge of the blade. So you are we often call that bleeding edge. Cutting edge is where you're cutting, but bleeding edge is where you're bleeding. And so you just want to be careful. It looks like a very powerful application. This is a GitHub repository. You can see it here. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't use it. I'm just saying that this is Media MTX, and you can see all these conversions that it does. And I'm actually pretty interested in playing with it. But I would use it in things that I'm not getting paid for quite some time before I put it into something where I'd have to explain it to a client.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Eric Hertz in Hartford, Connecticut. And Eric says, I want to move my Zoom ISO plus Isadora application, Vivo Wallflower, to AWS. Any tricks needed to make this work?
Ronnie, what do you know?
Well, we had some similar things we wanted to do in the cloud by using AWS. And when we started the process of thinking of this, we tested this instance for some time. And then suddenly I understood that I had to prepay for 24 hours. So every time I started it for 5 minutes, I have to prepay for 24 hours, which was not really cheap either. So I quickly went and bought our own M1 and put it in the rack instead, and did it locally. So I would look into the pricing. If this is something that is going to be running all the time and day in, day out, I think you have to check the prices before you decide.
Alex?
Yeah, and you can use things like Zoom Rooms in the cloud. So that's really where a lot of folks go. You're getting 4 outputs per room. We're about to do a bunch of cloud testing ourselves, and we'll be using Zoom Rooms in the cloud. So that's the thing you want to take into account. Zoom ISO may not be practical because of exactly what Ronnie outlined, but Zoom Rooms is a pretty well-known solution for that.
Next question.
Jacob Goodnight's up next from Indianapolis, Indiana, and Jacob says, is it safe and or recommended to plug a Furman power conditioner into a UPS?
Mitch?
I hope so, because I have a NEMA 25. I think it's the 3-prong plug on the UPS, and it would not plug into my Furman. So my Furman's plugged into the UPS. Now, I do know, do not daisy chain power conditioners. Not a good idea.
Jason?
Yeah, I second that. It's just fine.
And Alex?
You just want to be careful of overdriving one specific output. So if you're going to put a power strip onto it, or some kind of conditioner that has like 8 plugs in it or something like that, and plug it into one plug, you have to make sure you know what the draw is across those, so you're not starting to draw over 20 amps.
Courtney?
Yeah, it kind of is like plugging one power strip into another, because I think they both have MOVs in there for power spike control. So you're putting 2 MOVs parallel across the AC, and that may reduce or increase the amount of control that it's doing over spikes. So I probably wouldn't do it. I'd just use, unless you can take out the MOVs or turn off the spike protection in the Furman.
Alexander?
Yeah, I wouldn't do it just for sound. There's another argument to be made for sound. I find that power conditioners often, more specifically in hi-fi setups with amplifiers, power amps and such, that need giant bursts of power where dynamics matter. I find that power conditioners can negatively affect the sound. So that's something to think about. Just evaluate your setup. What are you actually going to be using it for? And actually try your gear on both just the UPS and just the power conditioner. And if you are listening to music, see if you can hear a difference too.
Next question.
Chris Widener's up next from Indianapolis, Indiana. And Chris wonders, Facebook has announced that they are discontinuing all third-party access to groups on April 22nd of this year. For those of us with clients locked in, what does this really mean? Will they likely relax their stance on third-party site video posting?
Alex?
No. They're gonna cut you off. They'll welcome to Facebook. Well, if you're wondering why we don't have a huge Facebook group, this is why. Because things change relatively quickly and relatively drastically, and that kind of weather is not something I'm able to withstand. So I think that they're doing this most likely for security. So this isn't most likely. They're not. It's probably not a business reason they're doing this. It's because they've been ever since Cambridge Analytica, Facebook has been slowly closing down third-party access across the network, and a lot of it just has to do with data protection. So I don't. You shouldn't think that it's some kind of business thing. They just are trying to close that up. It is devastating for groups. Like this third-party access problem has. There's a lot of groups that are upset about the whole thing. It creates a market opportunity for somebody else to start building something. Groups have been a huge growth factor for Facebook. Maybe they feel like they now have it secure enough that they can turn some of this stuff off. But it's it does create what we would say is it puts a lot of fuel in the air. So of someone else finding something else to do. So if you're thinking about those kinds of things, then this is the time to think about them. But I don't think they're going to go back.
Well, I sure hope somebody throws something into the marketplace that it's a better way for people to connect. I have completely been off of all of the Meta products except for Facebook groups, because when there's a power outage or when there's a snowstorm or when the trash collection day, like I go to my neighborhood group and that's the only time I ever go in.
You don't go to Nextdoor?
There's no Nextdoor. The people, I got to go where the people are.
Well, I'm just saying, here there's like almost everybody is in Nextdoor, and it is a cesspool of complaints. So it's like everybody complains about everybody else. I saw this car drive too fast past my house. That's pretty much Nextdoor here. So yeah.
Well, we're still catching up here on the East Coast.
Okay,
We'll get there eventually. Yeah. Next question.
Kern in Maine has a QR code question for us this morning. Has an office hours GPT been created? If not, might that happen? Collating the transcripts of years of content would be a great resource.
Jason?
Oh, I totally agree, Kern. No, it hasn't been done, and thank you for signing up. Go for it.
Ronnie?
Yeah, totally. I would help if I could. And then we have to find someone to pay the money, because this would be a greatly and a lot used GPT.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that we'll probably get the first part we have to do is like process everything, like process all of the files there. And I'm trying to think about how to. I've thought about this problem, and I think that it actually would be good. The problem is that a lot of the challenges, a lot of our ideas continue to change. This isn't static. If you asked us 2 years ago what we would use for something, it may be different than what we would use now. So I think that, analyzing that and then giving someone a note might not be the right answer, because it's changed in the last 6 months. So I think that's a bit of a challenge there. What I'm more interested in is actually trying to figure out a way that we index our answers in a way that you can find them, so that you can see when we said them and watch us talk about them or listen to us talk about them, given that we have the advantage that all this video is online. And so as I start to do short production, I've been building shorts that, we've been putting up. I think we'll be at a clip of about 4 a day, every day that these are going out. And at first I'm kind of catching up. Some days, like we had one day that produced like 10 shorts. The next one produced 2 shorts, because it depends on how we talk, here so But the point is that as we do that, I'm trying to figure out how do I use this processing time to find things and build things out. And so we're thinking about it. But I think that I'm more interested in finding a way to index. It may not be all the old stuff. It's really how do we index stuff as we move forward to to make it so it's easy for you to get to quickly.
Courtney?
Yeah, I was going to ask Alex if what they use for creating the transcripts, do they do a time code indexed transcript so that it has, time code markers every minute or so?
It's not every minute. So it is Opus, which is what I'm using to build the shorts that if you go to our website, you'll see, or go to YouTube, you'll see the ones. We got a lot overnight. It's funny. I put them up overnight. And then you get up in the morning, you go, oh, that had 2,000 views. so anyway, what was I going to say? So Opus does it by the word. So literally, you type on the word and it jumps right to that part of the video. So the indexing is very precise.
Opus,
yeah. Because what happens is I go to Opus. So what happens with the short production? We're going to show short production in the next little bit of time, but. I just take the whole 2-hour show and I just throw it into Opus, and then I go do something else and I come back. In fact, I grab a couple of shows and put them in all at one time. Then I wander off and I come back and they're all stacked up. I open them up. There's 40 suggestions of things that for each show. And then I start watching through them, and a lot of them aren't perfect. So I go in and I tighten up the start of one or end or cut shorter for something or add. I've added stuff. You can see a little bit of text before and after, but when you select that and say this is the start, it just automatically cuts right to that. Now there's a little bit of wow and flutter, maybe a half a second, where you cut to this word, but it actually still includes the word before it. So you have to kind of, but it's very. Very accurate. Yeah,
that can be tough with MPEG 4 because of the only iframes you can probably point to. Yeah.
And Evan Troxel says that Otter and Descript transcripts include timecode in the standard format. So those and I just haven't tried with Opus. It might. So, but we're testing all of these things, and the shorts, when we put them out, became much more successful than we expected, and we have to change the recording process that we're using to make them more seamless, and we're working on that too.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Has anyone tried the Bard or what's called Gemini for this type of stuff? I guess it's tightly tied into YouTube.
I just don't know if it has the video processing. I think that. I don't think it has the video processing right now to do exactly what you're talking about. I do think it would be very, it's a very small step for Google to take Gemini and point it towards YouTube and allow creators. There's no reason why, that's why I probably would be scared if I was Opus, or all these other companies. There's no reason why YouTube couldn't deliver 40 clips or 100 clips from a given piece of content and just give you suggestions, and you just watch them and do exactly the same thing you're doing in Opus, but then just producing content. For YouTube, that's a huge boom. Obviously, for Opus and many other companies, it may not be a great day when that happens, because their business will evaporate. So they have to keep on working on making sure that they have features that YouTube may not. Oftentimes, YouTube doesn't add all the features that a smaller provider will add, because that would be hard to support. Like I always think about it was described to me that every button in YouTube costs between $500,000 and $1 million. It was, because, it's all the meetings and the engineering and the design meetings and the process and then the gamut, the beta testing and the alpha testing and the beta testing, everything else is, so every button you see on YouTube, you want to think about, well, that costs somewhere between $500,000 or more for that button to take place. And so a lot of times they won't put as many features in it as other people will, because it's just not considered, the ROI isn't there for them. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see what happens here.
We've got to get the Office Hour GPT to tell us, give us a condensed list of all the never, ever, ever, never, never, ever, never
exactly.
moments.
Just one long string.
So it's going to be the top-rated playlist on the channel, I'm telling you. Next question.
Rian Smith in Trinidad, West Indies is up with this question. Have you guys noticed ETV's GlamBot slow motion shots? Any ideas on how we can simulate that effect with way less resources than they do? The video is at a timestamp of 5 minutes and 15 seconds, and he explains that it took 13 people and a robot arm, and he's got a link to the effect.
Bill?
Generally, if I'm looking for utter smooth slow motion, I want a camera that can be overcranked. At the top of that list are things like the Phantom cameras that do tremendous frame rates. But in general, most of the NLEs now have a kind of a simulation process to slow things down and do some interframe interpolation and things like that. Nothing is going to be as good as having lots of discrete frames to work with so that when you slow it down, you can slow it down however much or little you want and always have enough frames to get really smooth motion.
Alex?
Yeah, what makes this work is you can slow it down, but what makes this really work is exactly what Bill was talking about, which is that they have a Phantom camera or something like it, and they have it on a motion control arm. So the motion control arm, you design moves for that arm, and it will do exactly the same thing every single time. And so what they know is that they're telling these actors and actresses to stand on a certain place, and that it's got a big move, and then it does this big move, and then it comes up and slows down, in a really, almost stops the motion to make that actually happen. So the closest that you can get to this, what they're doing is going from real life to, a slow-mo. So what you could do as an attempt to get close to this that's less expensive is to do that big move with your phone or another camera that can do 240 frames a second. Or 480 frames a second. If you have, there's some, like a Blackmagic camera at, I think, 4K or at 1080p will go up to 480 frames a second. Remember that you need a lot of light. As you increase your frame rate, you're also decreasing your shutter, the amount of time your shutter's open. So at 480 frames a second, it's a lot of light out there to do this. And so that's the only way to make this actually work. And so you need a lot of light. You can get to 480 frames a second on a Blackmagic camera that I know of there. You can get to 240 frames a second with your phone. And what you're doing is you're doing a big move. And then as you do that move, you're gonna time ramp it so that it goes from real speed down. Now there's a couple little problems inside of that, which is that you're gonna have motion blur problems. So the issue is that at 240 frames a second or at 120 frames a second, the shutter's gonna look stuttery if you have it at the right frame rate at the end. But because you're slowing it down, you can usually get away with that by setting your you get a little bit more leniency if you set your shutter angle to 360 degrees or so, the whole frame open, which you can't do in a real world camera, in a physical camera, but you can in a digital camera. And so now you're gonna move into that. That extra will help you a little bit. You may still need to add more data to that. So where you have to go to get that to work, the motion blur from the real speed down to the slow motion, is potentially to go into something like Real Smart Motion Blur, and you're going to add more blur to it as you go through that to make that work. And you're going to probably want to add it at one point, so it's going to look a little dreamy as it slows down, but which should be okay. But those are the things you have to kind of think about as you think about these kind of fast ramps. You're not going to be able to get the same effect that they're getting. That's a $500,000 of hardware that's well tuned, and you're not going to be able to replace it. But you could probably start to approach that with a jib on a cell phone, or even just a handheld stabilizer with that. But the key is there is a lot of motion happening right at the very beginning. That motion control arm, you'll see that big open area around them. That's for safety. So they have to stand on where they're at. That's a big arm, and it comes in really fast. If you see, Marquez Brownlee has one, and he's shown, like, he did a special on it, and he, that's a big arm, and it's moving fast. It will hurt you. So it comes up, and you can see it there. But that's how you would get the effect.
Ronnie?
Well, as Alex explained everything on the camera, to replicate the arm without using money, I've seen some people, do-it-yourselfers, put a thing in the ceiling and then just rotate the camera and have, of course, a counterweight in the other way of the on the other end of the stick. That is possible, but it will never be the same.
Courtney?
Yeah, we used to do this with motion control and film cameras, and there's a lot of things to consider there because you are changing the frame rate at the capture rate on the fly, and you have to change your aperture on the fly and all of that additional stuff, which used to work fine. There were computers that were designed to do this, to do speed ramps, and coupled with motion control moves so they could have the arm move really fast, but recorded at a really fast frame rate so that when you play it back, it was really fluid, smooth move that looked like a normal speed move, but the people are moving in slow motion, but the camera is moving in a real time. I don't think, looking at the footage, I don't think they were shooting anything above about 300 frames. You don't need a Phantom for that. A lot of cameras will do up to 1,000 frames per second at 1080p and some at 4K. So you don't need any, the Phantom can go up to 12,000. And if you watch someone do a turn in their flowing skirt at 20,000 frames per second, it would take you about a day and a half to watch them turn all the way around.
Mitchell?
I just did a search, and one of the internet sites said it was an FX3 running at 240 frames per second. So there you go.
And it's worth noting that this is something that's, because of the proliferation of this shot on red carpets, it's becoming popular with wedding photographers. So there are products like, I think there's one called Orca View they have one for $4,000 to $6,000 where it's a wooden platform and then there's a crane where the camera is going 360 around. But just keep in mind, it'll be in that style, but $6,000 of gear is not $500,000 a gear. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and Douglas says, a Finnish group created an open-source intercom system. Could something like this work for low-budget productions that can't afford Unity? And he's got a link there to it. Ronnie?
Unity is actually not that expensive if you don't calculate in the cost for the phones or units that you're going to use. A lot of the stuff they are doing in this specific case is building cases. They are 3D printing. They are making a lot of effort doing this. These guys were funded by another. I think the university was funding them. So it's not actually cheap or inexpensive to do this. It's a lot of work, and you have to buy the stuff that you have to put into these boxes as well. So I'm not sure it's so low budget that it seems to be. And then it has to be some reason why they ended this in 2018 and didn't continue the project.
Alex?
Yeah, I wouldn't use it in production. I think that Unity is your first step up. So if you're gonna, comms are really important, and you should have them. And I think that Unity is kind of your entry level position. I wouldn't consider anything below Unity as something that I would try to use in a production. Comms are 50% of the show, in my opinion. And we use Unity a lot. We also use ClearComm and Readle and a couple other things. RTS occasionally, depends on the show. So they all have their advantages and disadvantages, but I wouldn't go with less features or less stability than Unity. I would consider that the ground level.
Next question.
Eric Strand is up next from Essex, Connecticut. He says, I finally started listening to Office Hours over the past few months. What a wealth of knowledge. Where does LTO fit into anyone's storage workflow? What LTO software are you using? Thanks.
Alex, let's talk tape.
I have to admit, I've lost too many things on LTO to be willing to put stuff on LTO. So I know a lot of people will talk about it being stable, but I would say that my failure rate on LTOs, and it wasn't my tapes, it was managed by a company that I was working with, but our failure rate was a solid 25%. Like 25% of the time we went to find something and we couldn't get it. My failure rate on hard drives is almost zero. The way with what we considered cold storage on the hard drives, what we did there is we would fill those hard drives up, we would scan those hard drives, we'd put them in cases that looked like cassette tapes, and we'd set them on a shelf. And we had a schedule where we'd slowly, within every 6 months, we would go through and turn every hard drive on and do a search just to spin it up and then put it back in the shelf. And so when our archivist was not working on archiving, they would just be slowly doing searches through all of the hard drives. And we reliably could find anything that we had done over a decade in 15 minutes, and have it online, as fast as we could pull off the hard drive. The LTOs, what we found was it took a long time to find things, it took a long time to de-archive them, and a lot of times we were missing bits. so I would, but I stopped using I stopped seeing LTOs as a storage unit probably almost 20 years ago. Like we just, I do know people who swear by them, and there's people with big rooms with them, and they're doing something that we weren't doing. I'm sure, but we kind of ruled them out a long time ago.
Bill?
Yeah, I used to use LTO back in the early days of my career, and not one of those tapes that I used back then is still readable today. Now, that doesn't mean that the format is necessarily evil. I mean, people in climate-controlled storage facilities that have large data needs that want to do that still use LTO every day, and it works for them. But for an individual user, if you're not on that industrial level and you don't have a climate-controlled and protected warehouse to store your tapes in, I'd just be iffy. Magnetic tape wears over time poorly, over 10, 15, 20 years. And that's been my experience. I try to put a tape into one of my old players. Either the pinch rollers and everything else is in there, or it's just so slow. You listen to this zip, 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 as it's trying to find the individual bits to read out. And it's annoying.
Chris?
The other thing that I think is really interesting is when you talk to people that swear by a system, I'm shocked at how many times you'll be talking with them and you say, so when was the last time you actually had to pull something off your LTO? Oh, it's been a long time. Like they swear by it, but they never actually have to rely on it. I also found it to be super slow, like Alex said. And I'd say I lost 50% of the stuff I put on LTO.
With any backup strategy, you should do a simulated moment where all of your stuff goes away. Like pretend like your computer crashed, you lost your hard drive or that LTO tape died, and then test the failover. Because until you've round tripped and you've been there and back again through a failure, you don't know how good your system is. Alex?
So I'm going to do an update. We're at the end of this question. I'm just going to do an update that I did do a little research while we were doing it. We don't usually go backwards, but I really felt like I was very curious about the GlamBot. The GlamBot is $15,000, so it's not like super expensive. The GlamBot, at least trademarked GlamBot, and it has rigs for whatever camera you want. It doesn't come with a camera. You can put your phone in there. You can do whatever you want. So we'll see if we can get those guys on the show. I kind of want to see what we have there. So I don't know. I don't think that this is the same GlamBot, by the way, that we saw at the Academy Awards or the same arm, because I saw that arm and I know that it was a full-on motion control, but GlamBot makes a much smaller version. So we were looking for less expensive versions. There you go. So we'll do some more research in that area.
Mickey popped a note into the chat that it was a Phantom Flex, not an FX3. He said he can clearly see it in the video. He must. Yeah.
It was a Phantom. The one that was at the Academy Awards or whatever was absolutely a Phantom. You can get these smaller GlamBots that might have an FX3 or a phone or whatever. But I know that when I saw the one at the Academy Awards, it was definitely a Phantom.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What's your favorite payment processing service for your clients in terms of fees, availability, and online transactions?
Alexander?
Well, I've been using Stripe.com for years. I'm a big proponent of them. They have very slick interface as far as the admin backend is concerned, and for what the client sees, very, very nice, modern-looking invoices. I'm just using the vanilla Stripe interface. I don't pay anything for it other than the fact that they take a fee for every transaction that gets processed by credit card. And they have a fantastic API as well. There's lots of third-party apps and services that build on the feature set of Stripe. And if you're actually going to be using it in your shopping cart system, it's very secure, very easy to use. It's by far, for me at least, I've tried a lot of different payment processing shopping cart experiences. They all sort of seemed junky to me until Stripe came along.
Ronnie?
Yeah, it's the same. Sorry for that. The same as Alexander said. Stripe is the one that we are being used for several years after we moved from another big vendor. Internally in Norway, we also have a system developed by the banks that are cellular based and in stark competition to Apple Pay, but similar. So we use a lot of those, but Stripe is definitely the winner.
Courtney?
I've been using Square for many years, old school. Liked it because, not many of our clients pay by credit card because I think the minimum charge is around $500 so on our services. So we don't do a lot of small items. And these days, a lot of clients prefer paying by ACH because there's no transaction fees, at least for us, when they do an ACH transfer. So we find that a lot easier for paying larger invoices, especially. Square was nice because we had the little things that would plug into your phone, into the headphone jack. Those are gone. So you could swipe a credit card on the set and take payment. And that was easy to put in all of our kits that went out so they could easily accept credit cards on the spot.
Mitchell?
I know I'm showing my age. QuickBooks Pro, it's connected into my checking account and works fine for me.
Bill?
I have accounts on about 5 payment services because I want to lower the friction to as close to zero as I can for somebody pay me. And it's always crazy when I do an audiobook and I build somebody either through PayPal or Cash App or whatever they've asked for. When I get it 30 seconds later and I've been paid, it feels really good.
Jason?
I've used Square since the very beginning. Most of my clients end up writing checks or just doing ACH, and I prefer that because it's free.
Next question.
Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, BC. Here on the panel, has anyone used Tascam streaming encoders and can speak to the quality? I don't know how many they sell, but they're not the first company that comes to mind for this type of product, and he's got a link there into Tascam.
Alex?
That'd be my concern. they're not heavily used. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. Excuse me. A lot of things that can go wrong with encoding. I can see how they would want to get into this market. I would really need to heavily test those. The things that we'd be looking for is obviously H.264 and quality. So what H.264 chips are they using to do the encode? We would look at, the stability, obviously. What are the upper ends of the bandwidth? They advertise that they can stream to 3 locations at one time. What does it look like there? Do we get constant bit rates? And also what's really common in encoders that don't work as well is bit loss that you only hear in the audio. And so what you'll hear is a little tick, 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 and you'll hear these little ticks that go on, and they'll happen every couple seconds. And in lower quality encoders, it's remarkably common. So that's the thing. Those are the kind of things that you want to listen for or look for. But I'm not going to say that they're good or bad. I'm just saying that those are the things you want to test for. Interface matters. So, I can't see how they have theirs set up. But I do think that those are things that you want to think about when you start doing the testing. I wouldn't put those into production super quickly because we want to figure that out over time.
And just a quick reminder, the show is run by your questions. So if you've got general questions, we've got till the top of the hour, at which point we're going over to physical storage, meaning in the real world, what do we do with all this stuff? And I'm really excited to talk about that. So we'll get to that at the top of the hour. You can do that in Makana. Also vote the questions up and down, and also go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global for a way that you can do your questions without any login. It's great. Anyway, next question.
Matt Halverson's up next from Brookings, South Dakota. Someone asked me for a streaming software option that would allow the viewers to private message the host and also has an RSVP option for the event that would automatically add the event to the user's calendar on their computer. Suggestions?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Well, not exactly the right answer, but we are using Zoom webinars for these exact situations, and it's working flawlessly.
Next question.
Kejeflad Gersvold in Tromsø, Norway. What is the easiest workflow and or software to geo-lock an AR 3D model? I want all my viewers to see the same model at the same place.
Alex?
This is built into the Apple APIs or, and SDKs. I don't know of any other place that this continuity is built into it. But Apple has a way for you it's using a mixture of GPS as well as image recognition to know exactly where an object is. So you can leave an object somewhere. Now, I don't know how to make that cross-platform. So I can tell you that in the Apple ecosystem, there are tools that are built into it. I don't know of any tools that are publicly available that that do that, but I think that those are the tools that I've seen, tested and used fairly successfully in the Apple ecosystem.
Ronnie?
Is this tools that are available as an Apple developer, or is it general tools?
Yeah. They're in the SDKs. So if you do a search for, I keep on wanting to call it continuity, but it's not continuity, but it's persistent. It's like persistent models. But there's WWC videos on it a couple of years back of being able to leave a model in a place, and so we would expect to see more about this at the next WWDC, now that we have headsets and so on and so forth. So I think but Apple's been working on this for quite some time.
I have this vision in my head where I can look out at a warehouse from maybe 10 feet or 20 feet off the ground and then pin the corners of the warehouse and then have my architectural model of what I want to put in that space sit on top of it. And then once I set it, then anybody with a headset could walk in and wander around and say, hey, where am I going to put this? And can I get through there? I haven't found that yet, but this whole possibility is just so exciting. Ronnie?
Yeah, I'm thinking of what Kjetil is trying to come up with here. I think the project is kind of a heritage site where there are old settlements, etc., and he would like to have a digital experience of those sites, but he would like to have these buildings, etc., pop up in the somewhat correct location when guests are visiting this site. And this is outdoor as well, so it could be that we have good GPS coverage as well. So this is the case, I think.
Next question.
Greg Gibson's up next from Washington, D.C. Can you further specifically explain the Facebook third-party question from earlier? What specifically will you not be able to do in Facebook groups? Thanks.
Alex?
So this is really new. I think the announcement was February 5th. So this is my understanding, is that the graph is no longer, the API and automations are no longer going to be available sometime in the near future to do automation. So what that means for folks is that if you want to schedule a bunch of posts, if you want to have there's a lot of scheduling or automation that companies use to, constantly update people, bots, et cetera, that are going to be able to that are interacting with that group, and they're going to lose access to do that. So the companies that are really upset, of course, are the companies that are automating, that are providing these automation services. I think there's one called Vipe, let's see if I can find it here. Vipe Cloud is an example of someone who does this. And so, I will say that I get frustrated with Facebook changing things all the time. But the other side of this is that I will say that I think automation and automated posting is the death of social media. So using bots, using automated posting, using all those things, I think is something you're going to see people want to tighten up on because it is something that makes it easy to spam the system. And I think also it also opens up the possibility of all kinds of nefarious things that go on there. So I think that you're going to find the next generation of whatever we call social media probably will be very limited in how they allow people to interact with bots. So so that's the I think that I think that I'm not going to argue with why Facebook's doing it. I'm just saying that Facebook has a tendency to announce things and then just jam them down the system, and suddenly everybody has to change very quickly. And that's why a lot of people have, there's still a lot of people that use it, but that's why people are more tenuous about Facebook, as it does a lot of damage.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Steve Bodner in Colorado Springs, Colorado. This may be a low-tech question for this audience, but Daylight has discontinued their tripod projector screens. Any recommendations for suitable replacements that hold up to repeated use, as well as the Picture King models do?
I've had a couple of the Epson duets. They, instead of going up and down, they actually will go left and right, which I've had them mounted to the wall, but then they also come with a tripod stand. I've had a lot of success with those. But Bill, you had a thought?
Yeah, I actually used the Daylight, the Epson screens as well in the last part of things. I will say that we're kind of going away from that all-in-one, because those used to be, if you wanted a wide screen, really long and cumbersome and hard to fit in the back of a regular transport car or something like that. So most everybody I know went to a more a frame and a screen that you could tie to it or something like that, because they're just a lot easier to travel with, and you get probably the same reflective surface that you can buy rather than the all-in-ones. I know the all-in-ones are convenient, but boy, there was a hassle to travel with those for many years.
Alex?
Yeah, the same thing. We tend not to try to do all the all-in-ones. For outdoor stuff, I'm oftentimes using blow-ups. We use blow-ups up to 30 feet, up to 30-foot inflatable ones. That takes a little bit of process to get it to work, and it does make a little bit of noise because you have to keep them inflated. As far as the daylight ones, I think that what they're kind of leaning towards is a lot of people. Obviously, they're discontinuing them because they're not selling as many of them, and so I think that a lot of people have done what Bill does, is figure out how they're going to mount them. I don't know of another all-in-one system that I would use. I probably would piece something together that was a little easier. I do get where you're coming from. I grew up using those all-in-ones, but I don't remember. I don't have a lot of great memories of unfolding them. I think that's the problem for daylight.
I have memories of a lot of pinched thumbs and fingers.
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking about pinched. How many times have I pinched the end of my fingers? Yeah, exactly. We had them at school, and we used them a lot. And there was always somebody yelling at some point when they got pinched into the system.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, BC, Canada. Back again with, I'm sending my iPhone 13 Pro Max back to my provider today and will be setting up my iPhone 15 Pro Max. Congratulations. Is slow motion video greatly improved? On my 13, the video always looked choppy at 240 frames per second.
Alex?
Myself, because I don't think choppy is the right way. I've always found that when I did slow motion at 240 on my iPhone 13, the video, you can see it flickering. And when I look at, I always kind of expected it to look like super fluid and super smooth, like professional slow motion video. And I never quite got that on the iPhone.
Jason?
Is it going to be better? I don't know. I was looking really hard for iPhone 13 Pro slow-mo back in my photos library, and you're right. It's flickery. Like straight away, it's flickery. Is the 15 going to be better? Well, you get more dots and you get much better throughput, which means there's a good chance that you will see an improvement, but it won't melt your mind.
Alex?
When you say flickering, are you playing it back at real speed, or are you playing it back in slow motion?
Well, I'm just playing it through the Photos app on the phone after I've recorded it. It was never smooth.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I have not had the problem you're talking about in slow motion. Now, you will see flickering if you're indoor, because you are taking frames much faster than than the lights. So if you're going to test it, make sure to test it outside. So if you're testing something outside, take a look at it, because your refresh rate, if you're seeing flickering, you have to remember that your lights are refreshing at 60 frames a second. So if you go above that, you are going to see some pulsing that's going on, because your frame rate is 4 times faster than the electrical recall. So that's going to be a problem. But if you test it on in the middle of the day outside, see what happens. Do you still see pulsing? And if you still see pulsing, that's something. I have not had that since 240 frames was a feature. So I'm not sure, but I also don't shoot very much slow motion in the house, because I know that the refresh rates aren't going to work unless I have done it. But that's where you start to use things like Kinoflows and other things that are professional grade lights, because the refresh on the old Kinoflows was 480 frames a second, specifically so that you could do slow motion without pulsing.
Alexander?
Yeah, it's not just like, and I understand the whole concept with like flickering, pulse width modulation, certain lights and stuff. I'm talking about the whole frame. The whole video is not like smooth. Like we just looked at that example from that award ceremony with the person in the dress there. That's what I'm expecting. But when I shoot it, the whole video is just, you can see everything kind of going wah, 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 like that.
I just haven't had that experience. So it'll be interesting. Maybe you can post a video somewhere on Discord or something so we can see it. I haven't seen that experience. I haven't experienced that for phones, and I shoot a lot of 240 frame per second stuff. And so I'm curious what the exact environment is there.
Jason?
So with enough light, I actually did find one. It looks really smooth. This is an iPhone 12. And it is insane New Mexico broad daylight, but it looks quite clean. So
that's in downtown Albuquerque, isn't it?
It sure is.
I've been there. I've been to that. I've been to that square with the water.
Yep.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and this is his question. When mounting LED panels in odd locations, in a floor, in a bowling alley, cool, how do you keep the panels from overheating, and how do you route the data cables?
Alex?
All underneath. So a lot of times, the ones that we've built before, we do build them. They've got a gap above them, and we've got a lot of airflow, and all the routing. We raise the floor up. So at least that's how we've done it. Is we bring the floor up about oftentimes 2 or 3 inches, and then there's a lot of air going below them that's pulling through. There's fins on the back on the bottom of them, and you're blowing air through those fins to keep them. And I don't know how they're done for larger installations, but that's how we've how we've done them in temporary installations, and they've worked fairly well.
Courtney?
And there are custom mounting kits that come with a lot of these LED walls that have brackets that are designed so that you can service the modules from the front side of the screen without having to go behind it. So anything that they put in a wall that's against a wall, or where you can't get between the LED wall and the physical wall, or in a floor, you can pop those modules up. They have these little handles that can attach to the front, to these attachment points that are built in, and you lift a panel straight out and unplugs and from the frame, and lets you service and replace a panel if there's a problem with it, and you plug it back in, and it has mating connectors on it so that you can plug them in and unplug them. They're wired from the back, and they have enough room they all have fans in the backup, which is heck for sound, which is a problem sometimes. And then those fans on each panel blow the air out, and you have AC ducting that goes in the area underneath the panel, or between the wall and the panel, to take that hot air that's being blown out of each module away.
Next question.
Kjetil Yersvold is back from Tromsø, Norway, and with this one, Adobe Firefly has changed the way I edit images. What cool video AI services in the same branch can the panel recommend?
Alex?
I think that what's done in Photoshop has changed the way a lot of us work. I mean, I use the generative AI almost every day inside of Photoshop to just clean things up. As far as generating those objects, other ones that you may want to look at is obviously Midjourney is the other obvious one. ChatGPT 4/Dolly is another one for generating basic images. There's another one called Scenario.gg. This is really designed for game assets and to build things that you have more control over. So you may want to look at those. As far as correction goes, I don't have as many, because I think a lot of us have really lined up into Photoshop for that. But those are some of the other ones that people are using to generate the original content.
Do you have experience with I think the question was about the video AI generators. I don't know.
There's and I misread that. I apologize. As far as those, now I'm going to blank out. There's a couple of them that are doing it. I was ready for a different answer. So
yeah, the cool thing about the AI with video, we've seen a lot of things related to transcription, to subtitling, to lip reanimation, and to doing like frame filling with a tool like Topaz.ai. Video generation, we haven't seen a ton of them. I don't think that are more than a few seconds of frames, and even then, it's more for how am I taking the stuff that I captured and cleaning it up. But if you're interested in some really cool tools, check out Topaz.
Yeah, I was going to say Topaz for correction. So Topaz would do the correction there. There is another one that Wonder Dynamics is the one you also want to look at. So check out Wonder Dynamics as far as they're doing a lot of. You can have a scene where you're running in the scene, and you can replace yourself with a CG character. And it will just basically motion capture, take your motion and put it onto the CG character, take you out of the scene, put the CG character into the scene. That's the one I was trying to find real quickly. Motion or Wonder Dynamics is another one to take a look at.
Cool. All right, next question.
Guy Cochran's up next. Seattle, Washington. Will office hours NAB production be the same as last year?
Alex?
Nothing's ever the same as last year or even last month. So, we're putting together all the bits and pieces. What we may do, and this is, I was just thinking about this over this week, but we may do a smaller coverage of GDC. If I can get press passes for GDC, that we may have an invite for people to go down and just do a very short coverage of that. Mostly so that we can test the NAB rig. So I'm going to be building out that rig over the next couple weeks for the main rig. And we do think we have space there. We're working through that a little bit, and we're collecting a couple sponsors to help us with the union stuff of getting stuff in and out. But we have an incredible team lined up. So we've got about 30 people who have volunteered, about 20 on the ground, about 10 online. One thing that we probably won't do very much of is we attempted to do a lot of records to upload last year, and we probably will, unless we have 100 megs of bandwidth somewhere on site, we're not going to try that. So it'll all be live. I think that sucked up an enormous amount of our time and didn't produce any output. So we're kind of probably going to avoid that. We may do a bunch of shorts, in where we're showing things inside of shorts, but we're not going to try to do a lot of post-production just because the bandwidth was restrictive. But we are going to then lean heavily, depending on, we're looking to see if we can get bandwidth at the booth, get a sponsor to help us with bandwidth at the booth. If that happens, then we will stream from the booth, and do a lot more from there. Otherwise, the booth is a little bit of a landing spot for us, and we will be heavily reliant on the live view and potentially live views that we use there. And so we'll really schedule around those. So those are the things that's what we're looking at right now. And so we are going to have our first meetings. I'm going to put out the announcement for the first meeting next week. If you're interested, the announcements to get into that team is in Discord under the Alex announcements. I'm going to bring it to the top here today so that you can find it. But take a look at it in Discord. Again, we have an incredible team on the ground and in the cloud. So I think it's going to be a great. Again, 30 people have already signed up. We expect that probably another 10 will apply, but we're probably going to close it pretty soon because we want to focus on who we have. So stay tuned for that. But if you're interested, go ahead and sign up.
Next question.
Paul Wallace is up next from Hot Springs, Arkansas. Will there be an Eclipse office hours gathering in Ingram, Texas on April 8th?
Alex?
We're gathering. Colleen is probably the place that we're starting to, or that area is the area that we're starting to coalesce around for the main hub. We had some great meetings yesterday with some experts that we think we may have a lot of gear in that area. We're working on trying to get a good space. I think Chris helped us find. We're chasing down a space there that we might have some bandwidth and might have a little space to work with there. So stay tuned for that. But we do expect, based on some conversations we had yesterday, we do expect to have a lot of hardware in at least one place, and then we'll have other folks contributing to those as we move forward.
Chris?
To be clear, Colleen is the place that has Ingram is the place that has the mini Stonehenge and the church that I reached out to.
Oh, okay. So then maybe
the guy was
Ingram might
super
be.
Nice. But if Colleen has
no.
hardware,
I thought that was Colleen in the meeting. So
well, maybe.
It's like Greater Colleen, I think.
So basically, what I had done, I just want to make this clear to the whole crew. I called the guy. Nice chat. Doesn't seem super positive that they would go for it, but he said, please just put it all in writing, send it to it, send me an email. He'll gather the board for people. He also said that they're worried, the locals, it's an older community, they're really worried because the rumor around the community is, like 50,000 people are coming. I'm leaving for the weekend. Like that's kind of their attitude. I was like, I wouldn't leave. It's going to be awesome. You should stay.
Well,
but
I think they should have a production crew in there rather than a bunch of random people. That's what I say. Just give us the parking lot, and we'll be good citizens, good stewards of the space.
Well, the intel and the information is in the
we're working on it.
Eclipse chat. Okay, cool.
All right, next question.
Philip Oler in Katona, New York's up next. We're working with a major client on sustainable archive solutions. LTO, which we discussed earlier, actually seems to be one of the more sustainable methods for long-term storage. Here's a company who's leading the charge on this, and he's got a link there, so more comment than a question.
Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, if you lose a quarter of your storage, how sustainable is it? Just like, that's my immediate thought.
And Alex?
And I'll say that LTO is a safe bet for a large corporation that wants to do something that everybody else is doing. I'm not going to tell you that you shouldn't do that. LTO is a very well-known, everything from government agencies to companies use it. And if you've got a full-time staff that's going to manage that and do those things that make sense, I'm just saying that a lot of us in the media world have had a lot of issues with it. So we're just telling you what our personal experience is with it, and we probably didn't manage it the way it should have been managed. But the bottom line is that we've other ways that we've managed it, and it's been really successful. But, obviously, if you manage it well, there's a lot of people that depend on it. So I'm telling you what our experience is, not what, other companies have had there. It's just that it's also like last time I used LTO, we would tell someone one day that we needed the content, and I would get it the next day. And, like with hard drives, I had it in an hour. And so it was a little bit of again, I'm not going to say that you can't use LTO. I'm just saying that I did not have good experiences with it. I'm not saying that it doesn't work. I'm just, we should wrap this one.
Courtney.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how much longer they're going to be manufacturing tapes, because they may be down to like one manufacturer that manufactures magnetic coating on tape these days. Since audio tape has pretty much disappeared, videotape has disappeared. LTO is probably the only tape product that's left for storage these days. I wonder how much longer you're going to be able to get the tapes, or if you're just buying new old stock that's been in a warehouse for a long time. It's questionable.
Next question.
Robert Sobabady in Poland. How can I add a PNG file, to a 3D sphere in Keynote? And he notes the Sonoma version with 3D support.
Alex?
Adobe Substance is probably the easiest place for you to do that, assuming that sphere has, what you want to do is make sure that sphere has UVs already attached to it. So most spheres will, because it's a relatively easy mapping system. So if you have a complicated object, you need to develop the UVs for those. And so you might go into Blender or into Cinema 4D, and you need to lay out the UVs. The UVs define how the texture is going to be mapped across the top of the surface. And so those need to be those tags need to be created before you bring it into Substance. But once you bring it into Substance is going to be the easiest place for you to map, refine, and change your objects. From Substance, you can export a USDZ out directly, and it's kind of an odd export because you'll export a whole bunch of junk. At least the last time I did it with Substance, and then you end up with one file that has all the textures and everything else you need in it. And so you take that USDZ file, and you can now bring that into Keynote or Motion or Pages or Numbers, and that 3D object will be there with all the textures available. So I would take a look at Adobe Substance.
Next question.
Kjetil years old in Tromsø, Norway is back with this one. What do the panel see as the most sought-after skills in media production in 2024? Go
ahead, Alex.
For what I'm looking at down the path, it's going to be a lot related to AR and VR. so there's, there's a lot of other things that can be done. We're also looking at a lot of cloud production. So cloud production and AR, VR are the things that I'm paying attention to. So understanding AWS is going to be important to us, but also a lot of the pitches that I'm doing right now are all related to either the Meta headset or the Apple Vision Pro. So those are some skills that I'm focused on, but I tend to focus on the front of a wave as opposed to the back of the wave. so I would that's going to be a very vertical thing to look at.
And it really gets down to, as there are so many new technologies that are happening so quickly, how can we make the most efficient use of our resources and keep moving faster and stay ahead of it? We don't want to necessarily be bleeding edge, but the acceleration curve that exists now is a lot steeper than it's ever been, which is pretty exciting. We're starting to wrap up the first hour before we get into physical storage. Just a couple quick reminders. Tomorrow we have our weekend Q&A, and Saturday it's kind of our testing and training day too, so join us for that. Sunday is introspection. Also happening on Saturday is our office hours panelist meeting. So last week we had our new panelist meeting where we did an intro of kind of the nuts and bolts of how to get started. Tomorrow's meeting is going to be all about just the current issues. If you are a current panelist, or if you were at the new panelist last week, then go ahead and jump into this one. And then on Monday was busy. Oh, I had Monday, but I forgot what it was. But I'm super excited to get into the physical storage stuff. I was jumping around all last night trying to figure it out. But you know what? Let's jump into that. And welcome to the second hour. We're talking all about physical storage today. So that's real world stuff. My cables, my cameras, my mixers, my microphones. Where am I storing? What am I storing? How am I storing it? What kind of boxes I'm putting it in? How am I securing that storage? How am I keeping track of everything with asset tags? And really, when you start to plan out your storage and come up with your ideas for what are you going to do, it's a little different if you're just an enthusiast or if you're actually trying to run a production company where you have a team of people who need access to the equipment. But number one, it's those big questions. And then I'm thinking about how am I organizing that material? How accessible is it? When I'm building those systems, I'm making sure to be careful to not lay too much concrete where I don't need to. I want to make sure that I have expandability and modularity so that I can build a system today that isn't going to all of a sudden have to be completely torn down and built up from the ground up as my space grows and as my needs change. And then eventually you get into topics like access control, security, asset tags. There's asset management software that's out there that helps you keep track of here's all my equipment, here's what it's worth, here are all the serial numbers, here's where it is, here's how many times I've sent this equipment out and how much it's come back. And sometimes it's just in your house, what's my best way to route cables? So it's kind of a really big topic, but we've got an awesome panel here to talk all about it. So Chris, why don't you kick us off?
CJ, you bring up some really good points about, bigger organizations. What I'd like to do is I'd like to show you a little tour of what I personally do. So one thing that I would highly recommend for personal use is this drawer system in the corner there. It's actually called the Alex. And do I need to say any more? Get it at the Home Depot. I like drawers. I know that Adam Savage very famously said, drawers are where things go to die. And yet, he recently did a whole video about a new drawer system that he bought. But anyway, these drawers are kind of cool. Now, I have another problem in my little home office here, and I have a bunch of stuff stuck on the floor. And I needed to get rid of, oh no, is that one of my passwords on the back of that monitor? Oh, don't look at that. So what I did is I'm working on an overhead system. And if you look right behind me, over my head, I'm starting to build a shelf up there. And my hope is to get all that stuff off the floor and get it up overhead. So a lot of times it's just a matter of just taking a look at the space around you because you can't see that shelf. It's out of my shot. It's all up there. Sometimes you have to just be a little bit creative with space.
It's kind of like I like to think about building up rather. I build on my y-axis instead of my x because there's only so much square footage that we have. And if I can take advantage of these nooks and crannies, I get
I'm
a
in a 400 square foot apartment. Very low floor space.
And then I like the labeling system. One of the best recommendations I got for physical storage was early on office hours. Alex is like, get the Brother P-Touch Plus. Get the label maker. And now there's labels on everything. Every wall wart, I know what it does. I've got these nice little 3-sided bins that, hey, this is my HDMI, this is my Lightning, this is my C, this is my Thunderbolt, this is my A to C. And then after my wife walked into my room and said, oh my gosh, you've got issues. But hey, that's okay. Bill, what do you have?
Well, I just want to think about here's how I think about storage now after many, many years of doing this. I think in terms of smalls, mediums, larges. I think in terms of a kind of a fake term I made up called kitification, because I find that if you put like things in kits, for example, all my wireless stuff goes into a kit, It all is in foam. It all had places to live. And I can open it up and say, yes, everything's here. I'm ready to go out on location taking that. In the large stuff, that's when you get into more complexity, particularly if you have to load trucks or unload trucks and the rest of that. In both medium and large, I'm a great believer in Pelican cases, and I have bunches of them. And I try to buy all the same ones because they stack really well. When you get a whole bunch of, like 1650s, and then smaller ones, the smaller ones I think of all together, and the medium-sized ones I think of all together, and they all slot into things. What do they slot into? I'm also a great believer that if you're going to have a limited space to work in, I like rolling metal shelf racks, and it's the kind that Costco and everybody else sells. You've all seen those wire racks. They're endemic in the restaurant industry because air flows through them. They're pretty easy to clean. You can get them everywhere. It's a little annoying having to change the height of a shelf because you have to use a rubber mallet to pop the shelf up, and you've got those little plastic collets, but I must have 5,000 of those. And it's great because for the medium cases, you can change the shelf width pretty easily and then put those medium-sized cases in there. And then when you get the big stuff, you're getting into, I saw that Chris has one of those yellow-topped Home Depot tubs that do like 65 gallons, and I think I've got maybe 5 or 6 of those. But it's all about that idea of kitification. I want to keep like with like and not get too spread out so that I know when I need to figure out camera accessories, it's that tub over there, and I know what's supposed to go in it. When I'm doing a complex road shoot, I actually will take a picture of what's inside that and pop that onto the top of the case so that I can see at a glance. I also have large tags that go in my cases that I graphically designed. And so I have like A01, 02, 03, and then a different color B for maybe the audio gear 01, 02, 03. And if I know I've got 5 A's, 6 B's, 8 C's, if I get all those numbers continuously, I know I'm coming back with everything I went out with. Those are just little tips I have for managing physical stuff.
Yeah, any of those bins that nest in with one another and stack up and down are great. I like that when it comes to Pelican cases. If it's general camera gear, then I get the ones that have the little dividers. But if it's for something that's more sensitive, like a lens or a microphone, I like the little pluck foam that gives it a really nice nest, because you have to think about not only can I stack it on top of one another, but how sensitive is the thing inside of it to drops and shocks and bumps and even dust. I mean, if I've got those shelves, but then the stuff is in cases on those shelves, I know that I don't need to worry about a little bit of dust getting on there. The other thing that is really handy is multicolored gaff tape, right? I know that if the box has a little red tag on the side, that's a video box. And if it's got a little yellow tag, it's an audio box. When I have, hey, here's a big bulk bin of XLR or a big bulk bin of extension cord or a big bulk bin of tripods and other bibs and bobs for camera gear. Alex.
Yeah, so let me just pop up a couple things in a kind of random collection of stuff here. You'll see here, this is some of the shelving that we have here that kind of forms that wall. And this is really industrial size. You can see it better here, I think. So this was our old warehouse, one of our old. This is the smaller warehouse between the two. One thing when you think about storage is roll-up doors are really useful. So being able to drive your truck or your trailer or so on so forth into it. Now, the one problem with this rolling door that you don't see here is that when you look at a space and you look at the rolling door, look at how much space is on the outside. So if you look at this, these were the rolling doors here. The problem we had was that the parking lot went really close to where we are, so you basically had to jackknife a trailer to get in here. So it was just really a complicated turn. So when you think about your overall space, you're also going to want to think about how much space is in front, how hard is it to back into, especially a 2-point backup to get into these rolling doors. But otherwise, it worked really well. You'll see we surrounded ourselves with these shelving units. So these are these larger industrial Granger style that are there, and of course they're like what Bill had talked about, but they are much heavier, take a lot more weight. You put particle board on them, and but they do collapse fairly well when you need to move. So those are those are things that are there. Now this is another picture of these ones in newer warehouse that we had that was a little larger. No, this is actually still in the same space. Sorry. And we built a whole wall with it. And we ended up putting a wall on the front here. So that was just like, so this became our kitchen as we kind of built up. But this is to what Bill was talking about, lots of Pelican cases. So this was the Pelican case shelf that had, so storage for the storage that as Bill was referring to it. Another thing that we did here is you can kind of see these in the back. I couldn't find a better picture of them right off the gate, but you can see in the back here, this is that wall we built that I told you about. On the other side, you would just see a big gray wall that it just looked like a wall, but we had just attached it to the storage. The other thing you have to think about when you start building that storage are these stairs. So these are the stairs that they basically, you push down on them and the rollers, they pop up onto their wheels and you move them around and you let it go again and it snaps down again. And so having these stairs running along those is pretty useful. The other thing we did is we built these what we called cable boats. So these are on really good casters. And what they had is we put all the heavy stuff on the bottom here. So all the big 100-foot rolls and so on and so forth there. On one side of it, we had little pins that came out that you could roll. So anything more than about 10 feet, we would roll and put them on little arms that stuck out on one side. Anything less than 3 feet, we would put on the other side hanging straight down. And we had one cable boat for IT, one for audio, one for video. And what was great about these little boats is that when we're doing a build, so you've got something you're building up, you just you roll those boats over to where you were working. I'm really about foot traffic, not having to stand up and walk in a lot of places. And so the boats would just move to wherever we were in the warehouse, wherever you're doing the build, so you could just go grab stuff that you needed. So that was, we found that to be fairly effective. It's hard to see in this image, but this is us setting up for probably Dreamforce or something like that. But if you look back here, up here, what you'll notice is a bunch of these little all 1U stacks. These are not rack mounts. So this is how we built. We built about 50 of these, I think. And what they are is they were just the right height, but what they were is little shelving units that basically had little wooden shelving units that came out like this. And they had felt on the inside of them. And so each piece of these pieces of wood was removable. You could pull it out. So you could drop a 2U or a 3U into there. And they were like little soft shelving units for all of our rack mountable stuff. We had a lot of rack mountable stuff because we were constantly taking it in and out of kits. We needed somewhere good. I just couldn't find a good place to fit those things. And so we built these racks. We also used a lot of the short ULine racks. There are lots of different places to buy the wire racks that Bill talks about, and I have bought them, I think, from every place that you can get them. And like the ones in my garage are the ones I bought on Amazon for the ones I bought in my garage I bought from Amazon for $150 each. The ones that I have in my room here are ULines that I paid probably 3 times as much money for. And there's a reason that the ULines cost more. So just, I build them both. I made decisions like, I don't need to deal with it that often. I don't really care. And so I bought Amazon ones to save money. But when I want it to be really solid, I go ahead and buy the ULine ones because they're a lot more solid. They construct more effectively. The little rubber stoppers or the little plastic stoppers work better. They don't slide as much against the ridges. And so, there is a reason for them to be more expensive, but you make those choices as you kind of go. So those are some of the things that I would think about when it comes to actually storing gear, is really thinking about how do you create something that's going to have a lot of access, and also how do you cut it off. So one of the things you'll notice is you'll see these big curtains here. So we were able to just kind of close these curtains up. These actually went all the way around, so we could actually close this entire area and close off everything that we had in those things and have it all curtained black. The reason for that is that we would shoot things like the Final Cut user group and other things like that. So we use this whole area as a shooting area. And so we put these rose brand in all the way around so that we could close that off and turn it into a shooting area, motion capture area, other things like that. But we designed all of that's why we left this big open space. All of our shelving and everything else was out on the outer edge. I am a big fan of compartmentalizing things. So lots of little shelves that have things that I like, clear shelves, so that I can look at it and see what's inside, as well as, heavy labeling to make sure that I've identified what's there.
And then you think about when you have a space that's that large, you're starting to apply a little bit of warehousing logic. How often am I going to need to touch the piece of kit? And then the stuff that's on the way top shelf, okay, that's going to be my box of legacy connectors. But if you do
Exactly.
have something that's 15 feet in the air and you've got those rolling stairs, it's got to be something that you can carry unless you're going to have a fork truck.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Courtney, go ahead.
Yeah, I've had a big problem with storage, especially for production equipment here in Hollywood, and it may be the same in many other urban areas, is finding a storage company that allows 24-hour access with security. So that can be a problem these days. I've gone through 4 different storage companies, and they've all been, the ones that have been here for years in Hollywood are being bought up by these developers and turned into apartment complexes very quickly. And so all the storage facilities were disappearing. And the only ones that were left were ones that only allow access between, let's say, 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. And that can be a problem if you've got a call if you're storing production equipment there and you want to go load it up at 6 a.m. in the morning, you can't get in. So eventually I settled on a company I found that has climate control storage. But the problem is that they have all their storage units were designed for film. And it has these steel film racks, which are attached, bolted to the wall. So they're not going to fall over, but they're designed to hold 35 millimeter rolls of film. So they're fairly narrow shelves. They're bolted in. You can't remove them. But the price was really good because there's not that much film around these days, and they open it up for regular storage. And it's climate controlled 24/7 to 50 degrees and very low relative humidity, like 34%. So it's good for your equipment. But I did have to develop a way to store stuff there. And I found these containers at Costco and Target that are the buckle type clear containers, which is fine because you can put a lot of equipment in each of those. They fit on those film racks. And of course, then I use the well-known cube type Brother printer and create the labels that go on the outside of everything so I know where everything is. And because it's a film vault that has to allow 24-hour storage because they're having to get stuff out to do dailies and stuff, reprints and things like that any time of the night because film labs work 24 hours a day, I have access at 24 hours. And most other storage units don't because they find that homeless people start to live in them because real estate prices in this neighborhood have gotten so high. That's why they close at night and do not allow access overnight.
And if you are storing things at an offsite facility that you don't own or that you're not going to be in every day, a whole another round of consideration comes into play. Is the vendor that you're using for storage, what does their surveillance look like, their availability, like Courtney said? What kind of security is there? And also, what kind of insurance do they have? Because it's not like the stuff that we're storing, production gear is, it's not cheap. And
Also,
so you don't want...
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say one thing I forgot to mention. Also, check to make sure your storage unit has AC in it, has power in it, besides lighting. A lot of times they'll have lighting that you can't control or you have a little timer, but there's no place to plug anything in. And if you're going to be charging batteries overnight, you want some place to plug in your batteries to keep them charged up. So make sure it has AC in it.
Yeah, also, if you're trying to do an equipment test before you take that out, you want to know, should I take case A or case B? It'd be nice to know before I get to the location. Is this stuff working? Ronnie, go ahead.
I don't know even where to begin. Some of you have seen pictures from our current venue or studio or storage or facilities, and we are growing out of that area. And much of the reasons are we've got so much stuff going on these days, and we are purchasing everything from A to Z, and we don't have enough and good enough systems to have this organized. So moving into a new venue will probably be a nightmare because everything will probably be bits and pieces lying on the floor. But we have done some thinking about this, and we have a lot of shelves, of course. We have a lot of flight cases, more than I can count. We have a lot of suitcases or Pelicans or similar, countless of cables and in different lengths and different types, and it's IT based, it's sound, it's video, it's everything that you probably can imagine. We also have We also have a mobile stage, which is needing a parking place. We have a lorry, we have trailers, etc. So we have a lot of stuff. Something is easy to organize, and I will pick up on the idea of using color codes for everything, because if you have color code systems, everyone knows that this blue cable, okay, it's going in the blue shelves or the blue boxes, which is probably video cables anyway. And then we have number systems, and of course we have labeling machines. But at the base of this, we are using a rental system called Current RMS, which is, I think it's UK based. And there are others like Rentman, etc., which are really popular. And those systems have the option to use either EAN stripe codes or QR codes or similar. We haven't just exactly found out how or decided how we're going to utilize that functionality, but I think that some of the things can be bundled or just bulk registered, like we have 200 power cables with 3 sockets, etc., and those are in a big box in one of the shelves, and they don't have to have unique numbers. And the way we package our stuff when we are going out to production is that we are going in these transparent boxes, getting the things and the numbers of what we need to be putting in bigger boxes, and then we make bigger flight cases that go on out on the road. So all inputs is being sucked up by me and my team just to see how and get good ideas from you guys to how we are going to do this in the future. So we definitely, if anyone is coming to Norway, please visit Tromsø. I'll show you the studio.
And when you have stuff moving in and out like that, having a system to make sure, like it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to build kits and I'm going to put a checklist in that kit, and everything that goes in is, I'm making sure I'm checking in and checking it out. But as your production needs change every single show, those checklists are going to change. So having a software like Check Room or Rentman or something like that really can help you organize all of those assets. Thanks, Ronnie. Jason.
Oh, all right. This is such a big topic. I'm struggling to think of what I can add to this. And those of you who saw the Vision Pro stuff from Tuesday know that my floor is a bit of a disaster. So Milwaukee Packout. These red ones are really, really cool. They are incredibly modular. They're really tough, and they have a clear top such that, you know, things can slot into each other. That is really handy, and I've recently started using those. Also, I have so much label tape that I actually have a case for the label tape. And believe it or not, this has actually saved me a fair bit of money because I don't lose the different colors of label tape anymore. Just my 2 cents.
Chris?
First of all, Jason, is your box of label tape labeled? Just want to make
no,
just double check.
Because I'm not a lunatic.
So Ronnie, to your end, and I think everybody here would agree, this is a classic example of something where what you want to do is you want to really front load the thinking of this, come up with a system, publish said system, and then adhere to that system. And that's the hard part. It's the last part that's the hard thing. You know, like Alex's warehouse, I love those. You know, there's obvious, I mean, you could see all those 1510s are just lined up like little soldiers ready to hit the road. You can tell that somebody's had really taken, you know, been passionate about coming up with that design. But what you're doing, Ronnie, is the right thing. Look around. Okay, you got the Jason's Milwaukee's, you got Alex's Pelicans, you got Fenwick's stupid drawers. You know, like, what can we do? What can we do? Think it out, talk it out. But the hardest part is to actually adhere to that system that you set up ahead of time.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, and take on that when people don't adhere to it, it's because the storage system didn't call them to do that. So when you build a system that people aren't adhering to, they're putting things down in the wrong place, it means that it wasn't clear enough or easy enough for them to do that. That's part of why, you know, like for instance, you know, for a lot of our roles, whether it was on those cable boats or whether it was on something else, we would have, you know, this is what this is, a little label on the rack. Like, this is 10-foot SDI cables. This is, you know, 15-foot, audio cables. And so it's really like paint by numbers. What a lot of happens with storage, with my own storage, with other people's storage, is when you don't have places for it, people just kind of set things down. And when you don't have easy places, and when things are taking a little bit more time to put in, people always, well, I'll just get around to that. So by having places for things that's big enough to hold those things, then you end up putting them back where they need to be. Other little things that made a huge difference with our cables. I was trying to find one that I could show you, but we take a label on our cables, and we put our logo, and this is Pixelgore, we would put our logo at exactly the right place on the cable. So we have a logo here right next to the connector, and a logo that was down the cable. And when you wrap them together, it would make it the diameter that we wanted for that cable. It may seem like a simple thing, but what it meant was that when you looked at the storage, all the cables were the right diameter. And also the 10-foots would stack inside of the 25-foots, and the 25s would stack inside of the 50-foots. And so you could build a case that was, you could store these cables in a really tight way. And it just had there was something that was very satisfying about it. And people would do it. It was a very heavy box. There was one box, though, that outdid us, which was this company that we work with out of Germany named Ambion, which is one of the best production companies I've worked with. But one of the things they had, we were in Italy doing something, and I saw this case. I had to take a picture of it. So what they have here is this is a road case, and what Ambion built was these inserts, and you'll see these little, you can see the little slots there. So you can move these inserts back and forth. And then they have inside of the door, they can put a pen just with a Sharpie or whatever, and they just go in here and say, this is how many of these kind of cables that are in each one of these. And they can move these back and forth and just stack them in when they're getting ready for a show. I mean, it was to me, the epitome of German precision.
And color code the cables by length.
And yeah, and they color code them, so that was some great storage. That's all I got to say. So that was, great way. I took a picture. I never actually built those cases, but we almost, to do that kind of thing, we almost bought the little big the router. I can't think of it at the moment, but I'm not going to think of it right now. But anyway, yeah, to build those from scratch.
And to build kind of what Alex and Chris are saying, as at some point it might even be beneficial. I know one of the things I employ in a warehouse is having every space have a letter and a number. And so if I have a shelf that has a letter and a number, and all the cases have that letter and a number, it's impossible to mess up. Where does that case go?
And by the way, ShopBot. That was the word that I was waiting for. ShopBot. ShopBot is a 8-foot by 4-foot router. That a lot of people, just as we talk about storage, when you work with really large companies, you'll see road cases, and then you'll see road cases that don't have any metal on them. So they'll just have the hinges, the front pieces, and all of it is interweaved wood, like they're all glued together in this wood. What you know is that company has a ShopBot. So what they're doing is they're essentially printing their cases. And so they're no longer going out to somebody else to build them, and they have all these things there, or they're working with someone with a ShopBot, because it'll build all the cuts to it. And I've talked to folks that have done these with cases, and they literally have a ShopBot running almost every day, all day. They're just sitting there slowly just cutting out this wood so that they can assemble them all, and they just, and it's a really efficient way to build those. But I don't know if Ambion used those, but this is the kind of thing. This is the kind of thing you do with a ShopBot is you build these little grooved areas here. You print these out. It does look like it was routed in here and then painted. So these are the kind of things. They may have sent it out to somebody, but a lot of larger production companies will have a kit in the building that will do that automatically.
Bill?
Oddly for me, this takes me back to being a little kid and my mom sitting down with me one day and talking to me about one of the oldest saws in this business, which is a place for everything and everything in its place. And that seems really simple at first. But what I found was that there was a delta. It was really easy for me to figure out a place for everything, where to put it. It became increasingly difficult in different circumstances for me to get things in those places. And in the field on shoots, it was easy because during strike, we would always make sure everything went right back into the slot that had traveled out there. around the studio and through my production life, when I got back to my base of operations, that was the place it was real easy to go get that particular cable out of something, take it over to do a project, and not have the discipline to get it back in place. And almost every time I went back and said, where is the power cable for this thing? It was because I had violated that. So I would just encourage people to try to get the discipline of the cleanup every time you do every project. If you take it out of a case for any reason, you should have a little nagging back part of you going, I didn't put that battery holder into the case where the equipment that it needs to go in was there. Something's wrong in my life. Once I started getting that down, it became much easier for me.
Ronnie?
Yeah, so the answer to Alex's picture of the divided flight case, we have several of those. You can get them at Thomann, and believe it or not, they are made in Germany.
I'm not surprised.
All right, we got some questions stacking up here, so why don't we dive into our audience questions, Bill?
First up, Ronnie Hopsoy, Tromsø, Norway. We're in the process of planning a new storage room for our studio. What cloud-based software options are available for drawing, annotating, and facilitating live or asynchronous collaboration?
Ronnie?
Yeah, so I just asked to elaborate a little bit about this. We are planning to move into a new venue sometime, not today and not next week. But we are trying to plan everything, and we are trying to get people on board and easily assist or collaborate on designing the venue. Maybe people in office hours could also be part of this. And what I'm looking for is something that is easy to use. We talked about Draw.io or similar. Maybe SketchUp has also been on the radar. But we need a tool where we can draw and is easy for anyone to use and to collaborate. Maybe live or even in an asynchronous way. So I need
Alex?
your advice.
Go ahead, Alex.
I mean, everything we've done in the last 10 years, maybe more, has been in SketchUp. So, that's the kind of the lingua franca of that. You can send someone to, or you can get a course, but you can do an online course for 4 hours and you'll know enough about SketchUp to be able to do whatever you need to do. So it's not, you can get better at it, but SketchUp is really powerful and has a lot of the tools that you're going to need to build these things out, replicators and being able to build instances, as well as being able to lay those things out. And then you can export those to things like USDZ and walk through them if you want to, and a lot of other things like that. So there are a lot of other things. I just don't know anybody else that uses anything other than SketchUp. So SolidWorks, when people get into more complex solutions, we see SolidWorks start to show up. But for these kinds of layouts, especially when people are hacking through it, we very rarely see anything. I rarely see anything in my world that isn't SketchUp or SolidWorks.
And just to give you a quick demo of here's a warehouse that I'm working on right now. And one of the pro tips is to make shapes into groups and components with a Control-C or Control-G so that they don't intersect with other things. And when you move them, you can lock the axis with your arrow keys, hold down the Option, and it'll duplicate it. And if I find a space, like if I've standardized my storage slots and I get it to where I like it, after you move it, you can hit 5x, and it'll just go, boop, there's 5 more. Next question.
Next one comes to us from TJ Worrell in Minneapolis, Minnesota. In-studio office storage is the topic. Have you found quality small translucent clear bins for short cables, adapters, and so forth? I've had less than ideal success with items from Costco, Home Depot, and so forth. Willing to buy once, cry once? ULine?
Alexander?
Yeah, so what I've been using, I wouldn't call them quality, but they're cheap. I've been just buying these these clear plastic cases from IKEA. I would never transport cables and other equipment in them, but for home storage, for storing some tools and cables, I find they work really well. They do break if you drop them. I had some tools in a little plastic IKEA case, and I dropped it on the floor and it shattered. So they are like $4 or $5. I just buy them.
Bill?
For connectors, I use little plastic bins in a wall arrangement. Have for years, same thing. I have switched in my cables, particularly small cables. Remember, I talked about large, medium, and small. When it comes to small cables, I coil them up, and then I actually put them in Ziploc bags now. And the reason I do that is it keeps anything from tangling up. You can write on them really easy with a Sharpie, and you can buy a bunch if you lose them or something happens anywhere on the planet. So I put that sometimes with an end connector adapter, something like that, in the plastic bag. They stay together and they never get tangled.
Alex?
Yeah, ULine and Granger are the buy once, cry once in the United States. like if you go to, those are the two, they're going to supply you industrial strength. This is going to work. You have lots of options. I've got ULine stuff everywhere because we built our warehouses with them. And Granger is the other one that I would go to. Everything else that you go into a consumer level, it's a consumer level, and it's not going to. And I would consider Home Depot kind of consumer level as far as what you're going to get there. So those are the two that I would shop at if I was looking for something that's a buy one, cry once. This is the storage unit. It's probably going to work the way it says it does in the catalog.
Courtney?
Me, I use the consumer levels. I've found that, especially since I do a lot of 3D printing, weatherproof, the type that I showed earlier, these latch top, buckle top, transparent bins are handy, and they do make these ones that are waterproof. They have a seal around the top of them, and then they've got buckles on all four sides that keep it airtight and waterproof, keeps the moisture out. That's important if you're storing anything like 3D printing filament that needs to be kept dry. They just take a bunch of desiccant packets and throw it in there with the filament and buckle it up, and it stays about 25% relative humidity in there. And I store lots of stuff in those. So I find those pretty handy, and they're not that expensive. They come in 52 quart and 79 quart sizes.
Alex?
Yeah, the other place to look if you're looking for storage that you may want to take a look at is restaurant supply. So restaurant supply, oftentimes will have things that you wouldn't normally think of there. I'm trying to get out of this mode here. Hold on, I was going to show you one more thing. Sorry, let me just pop this in here. The other thing that you do see a lot of everywhere when you're doing production, this isn't so much long storage, but this is stuff to move things that aren't going to go into your hard cases. You'll see these black and yellow cases everywhere. So these are $10 each. I've probably bought 50 of them myself, and those are super popular. And they're fairly durable. The key is when you start buying something like that, just buy them all from the same place and exactly the same one, so that they stack nicely. But when you're moving a lot of stuff, and I see a lot of catering companies and other things like that as a really inexpensive way to throw a bunch of stuff into a truck. I see those almost every day at a production somewhere being used for those because, again, very inexpensive, sturdy, stackable.
And big. They're not little. Every now and again, you see them at Costco for like $8, and then there I am with 20 of them in my cart, just rolling around the store with a little skyscraper.
Exactly.
Nervous at every turn. Don't go on a weekend. Next question.
Robert Sabavity. Poland is back. What is the safest way to store mics to avoid deterioration from dust, heat, and humidity when they're not in use?
Ronnie?
Robert, I'm going to advise you to use a Pelican case or something similar with the so-called plug foam. The first thing we do when we purchase new microphones is to remove them from the pouch, put the pouch in a new box, put the box in the shelf, and then we just slide the microphone slowly into the plug foam and close the lid and done with it. You can even put in some bags of Silica Gel if you would like to remedy the moisture.
Alexander?
Yeah, the Pelican case is definitely a good way to go. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of considerations to think about depending on where you're going to be storing this. Are you going to be storing this in a commercial facility? Is this just going to be at home? The way I do it, just for my mics, is because a lot of my mics already come with really nice cases. These days, you buy a mic, it's not uncommon. You might get a wood box or a metal case. So I just put them in big, clear bins, and I store them in my closet. I haven't had a particular issue with humidity, so that's nothing I'm particularly worried about. But yeah, just the built-in cases in a clear case with labels. That's why it's always good to have a label maker, and that's worked really well for me.
Courtney.
Yeah, be careful about storing microphones in foam. I've had problems where I've built cases that store microphones directly in little foam cutouts. And there's different types of foam. There's polyester foam and there's polyethylene foam. And some types of that foam degenerate when they're exposed to oxygen. Either they turn into dust, which can then get inside that microphone and contaminate the elements, and that is really bad. Or they turn into goo, which is even worse, where it just turns into this sticky goo that sticks to everything as it decays. So ethafoam doesn't really have that problem. The polyethylene doesn't. So look for ethafoam if you're going to store it in foam, or look for foam, some type of storage where there's a cloth or there's something that goes in between the foam and the microphone to make sure that if the foam deteriorates, it doesn't turn into goo.
Bill?
Yeah, I have some vintage mics that the original foam long ago outgassed and just went to nothing. And so I agree with Courtney. If you can keep away from that, it's great. The other thing I found, I have a lot of lavs that attach to wireless mics and things like that. And I discovered that pill cases, the regular Dr. RX pill cases, you can coil up over under a small wireless mic head inside one of those and then put the case in the foam. And that's how I have all of my small lavs. And it's absolutely safe and it's absolutely easy to keep them all separated and nothing ever gets tangled up. So I recommend that. Thankfully, my dog needed pills, and I got a whole bunch over the course of when he was very young. So I've got a bunch of those orange pill cases, and I'm never going to get rid of them. I love them.
Jason?
Yeah, prescription drug cases work really well for lavs. I have to reiterate that desiccant, even though I live in high desert, is really important. And if you don't have them in the vitamin bottles, Pelican makes, it's called the 1500D, and it's this little square thing that fits in every Pelican case and will absolutely make sure that you're immune from humidity, or at least mostly.
And to Courtney's point about long-term storage, if you've got something that it's going to sit for a very long time, be thoughtful about what materials are in that case and how they're going to age over time. We all love gaff tape, but if it sits for a couple of years, it gets gooey. Next question.
Zach Stahlsmith in Chautauqua, New York. What cases do you recommend for rack-mounted streaming computers?
Alex?
We lean a lot towards these SKB fly kits. So these are the fly rack cases. So you can see they still have the padding, but the big advantage of them is they pop out. So the centerpiece pops out, and they actually have some little ridges and indents, so you can stack these up. The advantage of them is that once you're at the venue and putting them together, you end up with a lot less bulk than stacking the actual cases, the rack mountable cases up. And ventilation tends to be a lot better in these than you would have in a normal system. So that's probably something to consider there.
And does something like that have brackets that hook them together as they're stacking?
Ratchet straps.
Ratchet.
That's what we use. We will stack up six of them and put a ratchet straps around them, which we usually have around, and then tighten them down, and they turn into one unit pretty quickly.
Not going anywhere. Ronnie?
Yeah.
You can also use gaffer tape. They also have these cool with the mixer rack slice on top. We've looked into those, and they come in 1 unit, 2 unit, 4 unit, and I think 6 unit. And it even allows for a SQ5 from Allen Heath to be lower mounted in those.
And if you have a couple little racks that aren't very deep, rack mount, not encoders, but a couple little things that are not very deep, and you put them together and you tape them with gaff right down their ribs where they would normally get put in, we call that a gaff rack. So if you ever hear us say just gaff rack that means put those two little things on there and just tape their little things together so they stay together.
Courtney?
I use a lot of the Gator cases. They're made out of a vacuum formed plastic that's fairly thin. I wouldn't use these necessarily for shipping on air freight or as luggage because they're not that strong, but they're lightweight. So they do, if you are shipping and paying by the pound, that comes into consideration. It's enough to protect the equipment, yet doesn't add, 50% to the price of shipping.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana. Up next, have you had success refoaming a case? What foam did you use, and why did you choose to keep the case?
Alex?
We refoam the Pelican cases often, and the reason we do that is because you can buy those inserts, and Pelican cases are expensive. So it's definitely less expensive to refoam the case than to send it back.
Bill?
Absolutely the same thing. I've learned one little technique too. When I'm trying to lay out a Pelican case when I first refoam it, I use toothpicks to try to figure out the pluck that I'm going to do, and then I stop and go away from it for a little while and come back because I've often reformed. I also have a rule: I never go below 3 rows of pick and pluck cube foam unless it's absolutely possible. I've learned absolutely necessary. I've learned over the years that any wall lower than 3 things is likely to deteriorate, and you will not get the protection you had before. So just tips about pick and pluck foam.
And remember, when you trace your gear in that pick and pluck with that Sharpie to pluck all the stuff out, take it out and flip it over, and they'll think that you were just really good at it. Next question.
Next one comes from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Naples, Florida. Adam Savage did a show on Tested where he talked about the storage at the ILM model shop and his incorporation of that into his own shop. Highly recommended watching. The philosophy of storage there was evident. What philosophy do you take for storage?
Go ahead, Alex.
I think a lot of things we've talked about already, which is that, you're looking for how to minimize the amount of time you're walking back and forth, minimize the amount of time that you're going up somewhere, and also thinking about what are you pulling out and how heavy it is. So a lot of times we won't put things on the ground that people have to pick up all the time because it's easier to get people to pull it off the first rack up if you build it right. So thinking about health of folks as they work through it, as well as just pure efficiency. How often are you getting to something, and how heavy it is, and how hard is it going to be to bring down from that location?
Bill?
The only other thing I'll mention is what I talked about earlier, kitification. If it's a camera, I would like to have that camera, all its accessories, the power supply, and everything else I need to build that rig in one place rather than having to go to 6 different cases to get things and build a rig. You can't always do that, but if I'm dedicated to a particular load in, I want to kitify everything I can so I know where everything is.
Next question.
TJ Worrell in Minneapolis. Who have you used for custom cut foam? For example, 2 layers of Decimators and an ATEM Mini or Mini Extremes in a Pelican 1650. I prefer that all of our gear be under 70 pounds so I can fly at the media rate.
Jason?
In the past, I've used pelicanfoam.com, and if you forget or need to refoam for a bigger under a smaller thing, these are really handy. These are the things that make the little thumb holes for your devices, and you can do that after the fact.
Alex?
Yeah, the one that we've seen a lot that I've worked with, I haven't used it, but I have friends who have used it, is what's called mycasebuilder.com. And so you can basically, they have a lot of the items already there. You can tell it what case, you can tell it what objects, and they already have that all kind of pre-built. When they send it back to you, everything's going to be labeled. It's going to be cut in. I will say that it definitely looks more professional when you show up. The reason I know about mycasebuilder.com is because someone opened a case and I was like, where did you get that? And so I haven't had the need to do that, but it was like, it just looked beautiful. And they're like, oh, I just go to this My Case. And we covered them a little bit at, I think at NAB one time, but it was because I went over there because I had talked to someone who had one. So that's something to look at there. Quick note is that unless things have changed, if you're using United, your media pass will get you to 100 pounds. But if you are a 1K, you can go up to 70 pounds and it'll be included in your 3 bags or whatever. But you should be able to go to 90 or 99 pounds in that. I wouldn't do it very often, but you can. And it should be the same price.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, is there any advantage to using ATA flight cases instead of Pelican cases for transporting gear by air?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, usually it has to do with insurance, because a lot of times insurance will cover if your equipment is packed properly in an ATA-rated case. The airline will cover replacement costs for the case and the equipment inside. If you can buy insurance for them that will cover it. A lot of companies will not will exclude stuff if it's not ATA-rated cases. So read the fine print in your insurance to make sure it will cover equipment stored in non-ATA-rated cases.
Alex?
Yeah, if you're doing air shipping, the ATA cases work well. If you are trying to check ATA cases, just note that the way the airlines view those is the first thing, if they get full in the airline when they're packing things, the first thing that's not going to go on the plane is your ATA cases because they're very difficult for them to work with. They're heavy. You're giving up a lot of weight. So we talked about that right before that. You might have a weight, if you're trying to fly and you have a max of 70 pounds, an ATA case is going to be half of that at least, if not more. And so that's the big problem you have is that, I mean, you may have an ATA case that's nearly the whole weight distribution that you had there. So But they are great when you are now drop shipping. So if we use something like Rocket, all of our stuff is ATA, or almost all of it. We might put some stuff in. The key there, by the way, is to keep, if you're going to fly, is to keep everything we keep it under 52 inches. I think 55 is the official number. Everything doubles when you go over that. If you go to 56 inches, everything's going to double in cost because they can't use the containers that they normally use to put into the plane. So those are the things to kind of keep in mind.
Next question.
Zach Stallsmith, Chautauqua, New York is up next. Has anyone used a QR code or near-field communication tag to be able to quickly scan cases to see their content or other info about the case?
Ronnie?
Well, we are planning to do that. We haven't looked deeply into NFC or scan bar, digital scan bar, but we probably be using QR codes. And of course, we're using AirTags from Apple to track our cases and their, yeah.
Alex?
We put an AirTag into every case. It is hugely useful. We've tried using NFC and QR codes on all of our equipment. People just don't do it. We get back into that, like when people are packing and unpacking, we just can't get them to do it with their phone. They're too busy trying to get out. And so that hasn't been successful for us.
And if you were trying to work on seeing the content of the case by scanning something from the outside, you want to make sure that it's password protected so not anybody can scan that QR code to see what's inside the case. But also you're going to have to tie it in with some sort of asset management software that's going to have a link to somewhere where you can maintain, hey, this is in what's in case 1A, 1B, 1C.
And by the way,
go ahead.
you can do what we do is we give the case numbers, and then we have a file that just says what's in the numbers. This is incredibly important if you're going through customs, because if you're using a carnet in customs, they're going to say, I'm looking for this item, and you need to be able to find it. And the faster you can find it, the less items they're going to look for. If you go in, if you pop up in a piece of paper and they say something, and go, oh, that's case 8, you open to case 8, you immediately pull it out and show it to them. Usually that's the only time they're going to ask. And if you go to the airport multiple times doing that, at some point they'll just stop asking to open your cases because they know that you got it all dialed in.
Next question.
Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri. I've soured many client experiences with exploding pack syndrome and general disorganization. Proper storage is expensive. Any tips on the best practices for managing gear and cables on location?
Alex?
Yeah, really having slots for everything, having little openings and it does make a difference, as you said, to not open something and have it be a big mess. Number one is all your cables are rolled. We use Eagle Creek bags. They have a cube system, the Eagle Creek cube system, and we'll put everything in there, and I'll just take white gaffer's tape and put it across the top and draw on it like this is SDI cables, this is this. And so at least when you open it, it's got a bunch of things, and you kind of, everything's kind of in some order that you can kind of move around in. But you definitely, production is a confidence game, and your client having confidence in you does matter. And so, coming with solid cases, and I started with catering carts and milk crates, so I definitely grew up one step at a time to getting those things. But having separators inside of your Pelican cases, having Pelican cases, and having things, you may find that the cube system will go a long way in helping you organize all your cables and a lot of your gear in a way that just doesn't look bad.
Courtney?
Yeah, I go by the theory that always store any cables and accessories that are required to run a specific item in the case with that item. So make sure that the power cord, each case that has a monitor has the power cord, SDI cable, whatever is required to hook that equipment up in the case itself. Everything else, which is your go-betweens, your hookup cables, your accessories, your converters, your adapters, all that can go in an AKS case. And Ziploc freezer bags I find very, very great to store short HDMI cables, other small cables to keep them from tangling. You can just slot those into a partition inside an AKS case. And to look in the AKS case if you can't find a connector that goes to a specific piece of equipment. Always carry a case that is a catch-all for everything that you can't categorize.
Next question.
Rian Smith in Trinidad, this is cool, in the West Indies, says this is better than Silica Gel for moisture absorption. It's called molecular Sieve, and he's got a link to it. Cool.
Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, there are lots of superior desiccants to silicant. The difference is that there's a reason that that silicate is the industry standard. It is inexpensive, it's environmentally friendly, and it's everywhere.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. How do you handle cardboard boxes, particularly labeling, stacking, flattening, and so forth?
Alex?
I use as little as I can. It's not that I never use cardboard boxes, but I use as few as I can because I can't see in them. So usually I replace them with clear plastic cases pretty quickly. But if I'm using cardboard boxes, I will tend to make sure that they're modular, which means that they are there's a unit, whatever that unit is, and these are modules of that unit so that they will stack together. So I want it to be, let's say a unit of 1 foot by 1 foot. The other cases should be 2 by 2 or 2 by 1, but they're all some version of that, so that when I stack them all together inside of something, that there's no extra air gaps that are there. Also, when you're thinking about stacking them, just remember heavy stuff goes at the bottom. And you can stack it's easy to crush them. So that's why a lot of us will move to those black and yellow ones because they will hold a lot and you can keep on stacking them. And moving to those make it a lot easier, and you tend not to crush things the way you would with a cardboard box.
Go ahead, Bill.
This is a +1 on that. I bought at some point in my career a whole bunch of what are called attached lid production totes. They've got 2 flaps and they flap together. But exactly as Alex is saying, over the course of time, I realized that when I was stacking things up, those flaps started deconstructing and they didn't work as well anymore. And pretty soon I had a bunch of totes that didn't work as I wanted them to because of wear and tear. Cardboard's in the same category for me. For one shoot, one time, I'll take something out in a cardboard thing, but I never store anything in cardboard. It's just not strong enough and dependable enough.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana. Who do you trust to securely store your gear when you're away from home? At trade shows, at hotels, on scary dark alleys overnight?
Courtney. I trust Courtney.
Yeah, well, you can guard your gear. You can hire bonded security guards. Make sure that their employees are bonded. You can use these at trade shows where you're leaving your equipment out and exposed in a trade show and unattended overnight. They will stay. You'll hire someone to stay there overnight with it to make sure nobody lifts it, runs away with it. Also on set, a lot of times you'll go in and have a pre-light day or something where you'll have to have equipment set up and exposed to the public, and it has to sit there overnight. So you have to hire a security guard there to sit and watch it 24/7.
Alex?
Yeah, most of the time we have security that's available to us, or we just put that into the budget. Overnight security is something that's just part of what we do there. Oftentimes, even if you're what you think is a secure area, you don't want to explain to a client, especially if you have a warning activation, why something wasn't ready to go. So you want to have someone there. In addition to that, we typically have some security cameras. A lot of times we just simply use a lot of the drop cams and so on and so forth in there. We make sure that they have their own power, so that they're backed up with battery and they're connected to a MiFi so that they're not connected to, you can't really disconnect them easily until you find that MiFi. And we tend to have some cameras that are very obvious and some cameras that are not obvious looking at those cameras. So for a large build out, we might have 6 or 8 cameras that are covering our space in addition to security. And we have found people picking things up as they walk by, and those folks are no longer working there. so anyway, when you have video that you show to folks, it definitely takes the fun out of it.
Next question.
Next one comes from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Naples, Florida. How would you store office chairs for a tour? They are so hard to package, in my opinion. I agree.
Go ahead, Alex.
Some will store upside down. So you take I take all the big thing that I do is I take all the arms off. So I don't know. Some people like arms, some people don't. I decide that loading into a place, the cost is you take the arms off so that you can turn them upside down and stack them at least 2 of. And then we tie them together and they run around. It looks like a little herd of sheep as we load in, that there'll be like, 10 or 15 or 20 of these chairs that all just kind of get pulled along and they just kind of are, but we kind of rope them all together and just kind of move them along to get them in. It is not a great way to package them. They're usually the last thing that goes into the truck. But I will do that for my crew often on a larger, like a multi-day. So if it's 3, 4, or 5 days of production, I'm going to bring my own chairs because the chairs at the venue are going to be horrible and it'll actually affect the performance of the crew. And so it's not a comfort thing as much or being nice. It's like people can't think when they're sore all the time and frustrated.
Next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin. Funny, the Ambion modular flight case with all the flexible devices and color coding is exactly. How do we do as well? Maybe a typical German thingy?
Go ahead, Alex.
I think it's that this maybe is normal in Germany and not normal in the United States. I had not seen one before, and I've seen a lot of kits, and it's whatever it is, it's great.
Next question.
Laura Thompson in Beaumont, Texas. Do you find Cocoon Grid useful for cables? And she's got a link there to cocooninnovations.com.
Go ahead, Alex.
I've owned some of these, and I tried to like them, and I just couldn't quite. It just never really kind of fit into a place that made sense. I'd rather just put them in a bag. I found pulling them in and out of the little stretchy things, just I didn't like it. So I definitely tried these for a couple of years and just couldn't, because I really thought that they looked like a great idea. This is what they look like here. They're like these little panels with little stretchy things that you can kind of put things into. They may work for somebody. They just didn't work for me.
Yeah, the Apple Store sold these for a little while, and I'll second that. I tried really hard, like on multiple swings at it over the years, and I never got into it. Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana. How do you decide on what goes on what shelf in storage? Size, weight, kit, purpose, expense, moisture, packaging, color?
Alex?
All those things. I don't really pay much attention to color, but otherwise, how often are we going to use it? How hard will it be to move from that location? And also some levels of security. Obviously, we're putting things. We have cages oftentimes that we put things into. Those are the highest security things that we have there. Another thing in general is don't put a lot of stuff outside. So the last warehouse that I had with PixelCore, we actually called it the UDL, which is the undisclosed location, except the thing on the outside said Unified Distributed Logistics, which is what it said. But for us, what it really was the UDL. Our mail didn't go there. We didn't have anybody deliver anything there. It was, because it was 10,000 square feet of $1.5 million worth of hardware in not the best part of town. And I wasn't going to, and we had security. We had lots of things. We didn't have a physical security, but we had lots of security systems and everything else. But the point is that part of this is don't show off. So you want to, like when you try, like my when I've had trucks, they've always just been white, unmarked, I don't put a lot of stuff on the outside. Nothing like saying rob me, like AV company on the side of your van. I know that you can advertise and get more work, but you just got to be very, very careful of those kinds of things. So we try not to advertise those types of things when we do storage as well.
Next question.
Tlaloc Lopez Waterman, Naples, Florida. How much do you classify? Bolts by size and type, or just bolts?
And go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I always buy these kits, and I separate metric from SAE always. And I buy these sets of metric screws and nuts, which have them all organized in this nice plastic case. I have those for both SAE and metric, and I always carry them with me because you never know when a bolt is going to break off a piece of equipment, and you got to figure out whether it's metric or SAE thread size. And usually you'll have a replacement if you have one of these multi-size kits that are all.
Jason?
I've got two lines, thread and width on one line, and then if it has a specific use, like it is the screw for this, then that goes on the second line.
And Bill?
Class to this extent, I have quarter 20s, I have 3/8/16s, and I have rack screws. Those are all in their own separate little things. And outside of that, I have a generic bunch of bolts and nuts and washers and things like that in all sizes. So if I know I'm going to use one of the first three classes, it's there, and those are the ones I use most often.
And my last pro hardware tip of the day is going to be if you're disassembling furniture and it uses machine screws, screw the screw back into the piece of furniture before you put it in the box, because then you won't be worried about getting it back together. Okay, wow. This was one of those topics where I got to the beginning and I was like, are we going to have enough to talk about a physical storage? And we ended up having so many questions. Thank you so much to our producers who asked the great questions. Thank you to the panel for being here and giving all your insights, all the life experience that's around this table right now that is just enriching everybody. It's just so exciting. Also, thank you to our crew. We've got the folks on the back end who wake up 7 days a week to make this show possible. We really appreciate it. On the Silica Traversal today, we traveled 83,000 miles. That's 133,500 kilometers, which is 656 million bananas for scale. We'll see you in after hours.
I forgot all about my case builder. And I met the guy at NAB years ago, and it was so good. He's so good.
Yeah, there's a couple of them, but that one is.
We could have a second hour on casters on those cases too.
Oh yeah, exactly.
By the way, CJ, great job hosting today.
Thank you.
Yeah, well
Good
done,
job.
CJ.
CJ's first weekday hosting.
Absolutely. And
We got
Still watching. I don't know who's doing Saturday. It'll probably be me. But if people are interested in hosting, like Alexander Knight is going to host tomorrow. We know. I've just pressed him in. He's like, "What are you talking about?"
That look. Oh, that
shells
look.
in my closet.
Do it, Alex. You could host Saturdays. Do it.
Hey, we're all doing new things. I'm cutting Sunday.
See,
I do want to
crazy.
host one day.
Well, host Saturday.
It's tough. My work schedule doesn't. I work on Saturdays.
Just tell them you have other more important things to do.